Hello everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the lab. With me today from Hawkin Dynamics, I have Drake Berberet.
Nice. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, thanks for coming on. I know your schedule's been insane, so happy to finally find a time we could both, one, get the memo of, black hats and mustaches. So that's awesome. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you're listening, we're almost wearing the same thing right now. So good planning on our part.
glad you got the memo.
Yeah. The internal memo.
No, but the reason I wanted to bring Drake on for today, guys, is we've had a lot of different physical therapists on here on the show. We've had strength conditioning coaches galore on here as well, and also a few dietitians. So what I wanted to kind of change it up here a little bit and actually bring someone who's been in the sports science field. I know we have a lot of different younger listeners that are going off to their freshman year in college and maybe are looking into something in the sports or medical world. So what I want to do is bring someone who has a great insight with that. So, Drake, before we kind of get into the nitty gritty and some of I have an entire list of questions to just kind of grill you with here, man. No, but just kind of
Yeah.
take me a little bit about your journey in sports science and like how you got to where you are today, man.
Yeah. So you kind of just mentioned those different career paths. I've kind of done a little bit of each for really just, a little bit of time. Um, but I started out like my journey actually started long before probably it should have. It started sooner than other people my age, but Um, actually, outside of the exercise science stuff, there's kind of some business stuff that merged in there. But I like to talk about this first because it kind of allowed me to do all the stuff I was passionate about. But I had started a power washing business when I was 17, which is probably off the track you thought we would go today. But
Nice.
I started that because I came home from college and my mom was like, "Hey, you need to have a summer job, right?" And I started looking around. I hadn't really had a real job yet. I played a lot of sports in high school. I played four, was constantly busy doing that. Went to college, played college football, but came home for the summer. Hey, you need a job. So I start looking around on the internet, start looking at the salaries, and I'm like, I don't think my time is worth that, right? Like I don't think this, 12, $10 an hour job is worth my summer. So started trying to think of different ideas and I came across this idea of power washing and I invested, 300-400 bucks into a power washer. This was kind of my first like sales partnership experience, but I basically went around to my friends and their parents, went in, met with them, took my friend in, met with their parents and tried to pitch like, hey, this is why your son should join me in this business this summer. Because hey, they're working at this, golf club, grocery store, or whatever. They're making this amount of money. I'm like, hey, we're gonna buy power washers. You just have to invest in this business 300-400 bucks, buy them a power washer, and we're gonna make a ton of money, right? Like that was the pitch. And I did that for three of my friends. Their parents all turned me down. I finally had one friend that said yes. I
Nice.
mean, we made a lot of money power washing at 17 years old, and I ended up doing that for 6 summers after that. But essentially, what that allowed me to do was actually do the stuff that I was passionate about, which was pursuing a career in sports performance, nutrition. That's kind of where I ended up going. But
Hmm.
um, basically, that allowed me to like take a chance at doing different internships that were unpaid with people that were, like really valuable to my career trajectory. It allowed me to take a chance using that money to go then, invest into. I lived in Denver, Colorado, and worked for a guy named Max Schmarzo. Expensive place to live, but that experience of cleaning houses, RVs, cars, fences, every ground, like the ground,
Hmm.
allowed me to do that. So fast tracking all that, through college, I studied exercise science. So I have a bachelor's in that. I have a bachelor's in human performance. I did that in 3 years, cut football a year short. Um,
Wow.
started my master's literally the day that I stopped my bachelor's. So I actually got my master's done in 4.5. And then I was teaching classes like through that master's also. So I've got some experience actually teaching as a professor at the college level to just freshman, sophomore students. My master's is actually, it's kind of weird. It was like a physician's assistant master's program
Hmm.
because the school didn't really have a physiology um, master's at that point, but they like wanted me to be there and do it. So I was doing the PA classwork, and then I was going in the afternoon to meet with exercise physiology teachers that were in the undergrad, and they were like giving me additional coursework.
Mhm.
So actually, I have half my master's like kind of in a pseudo PA. It's like a really deep understanding of like of pharmacology, biochemistry, anatomy. And then I realized, hey, I actually hate like being, I wanted to be back in that team setting that I'd experienced in Colorado, like with the athletes and stuff. And
Mhm.
so I was like, I actually hate this. And so I dropped out and I landed a job at Illinois basketball. So like it actually really worked out. And I actually wanted to be a sports scientist for basketball or football team, like long term. So I got to Illinois really young. I worked for a guy there named Adam Fletcher. I transferred all those credits from that PA thing into Liberty, graduated with Liberty with a master's in nutrition. Um, Spent 2 years at Illinois. That's
Dang.
where I found Hawkin, and been with Hawkin for. I've been out here in Maine 4 years now, on the ground, but 6 years almost, about 5.5, 6 years full time with Hawkin. So yeah, it's like the passion's probably biochemistry. I think I spend a lot of time in biomechanics now. But I've got a small background in nutrition. I actually was a strength coach throughout that whole time too. So strength and conditioning, nutrition, biochemistry, a lot of biomechanics, and that's kind of where we're at today.
Dang, man, you've
So
done a lot. That's
really
pretty
quick,
sweet.
like it's been, it's been cool, but it all happened really quick, and one thing flows into another, and like, looking back, I actually started in PT, like, that was the track, like, as probably if you're young and you're listening to this, you're like, "Yeah, I showed up at school in college," and they were like, "Oh, what do you wanna be?" And they're like, "Oh, you wanna be a PT, you like fitness," and they're like, "We're gonna put you on this track, and then this is what you're gonna do," and I realized really quickly that, yeah, PT would be cool, and it's, like, safe, and you can make good money doing it, but like
Mhm.
you kind of top out at a certain point unless you're doing your own thing. And also like you're probably gonna have to work with like older individuals for the first 10 years before you can kind of do something you want to do. And I was like, that doesn't sound like what I really want to do. So I actually, I learned what strength and conditioning was in the middle of college. Um, and then I learned what sports science was. And then I think if you're listening to this, you just know that other options exist besides, hey, you need to be a physical therapist. There's other ways you can work with athletes and even work within the realm of rehab and not necessarily need to be a therapist. So
Bingo. Bingo,
that's what I
dude.
got.
Oh, awesome. Dang. Oh, that was great background, man. I love that. So like you said, you went to where was your undergrad at again?
So it was a school called St. Ambrose in the Quad Cities. So I'm from Central Illinois. Um,
Okay.
it's about 3 hours north of where I grew up. But yeah, I played like football was the main thing in high school. Won 4 state championships. The school that I was a part of, they've won 9 now in like the last like 12 years. So like
Mm.
a really winning program. Taught me a lot about like leadership, winning, like what winning looks like in sport. So that was a cool experience. But yeah, got a scholarship to go up and play football at that school.
That's pretty sick, man. Dang. So like would you say like in this day and age, because obviously like well, how old are you? I don't think I've ever even asked you that before.
28.
Okay, yeah, so you
Yeah.
and I are pretty close in age. So like back in the day, I feel like there's so many different like there weren't as many majors going into like
Oh
I feel
yeah.
like strength conditioning like as a field is just so young. And so looking at like all the like you have that exercise science, exercise physiology, pre-PT, or sports management, dietitians or dietetics, and like what would you say now, like would if you have like an incoming freshman and they're looking into maybe like they know like yeah, I want to be sports science, like what would be like a good major for them to be like starting to look into now? And maybe like I guess what would you recommend for them if that's something they want to
Yeah,
pursue?
I think if we're like really thinking about sports science here, it's still
Mhm.
really new, and they're really just came out with the certification through the NSCA recently. So it's kind of accredited, kind of not yet. There's not real requirements behind what makes a sports scientist. Like if you're looking at every job posting that's listed, they're all going to have different requirements on there. I
Yeah.
think the people that are in the sports science positions now, like with sports teams specifically,
Hmm.
they are probably more of the strength coach type that then merge into a sports scientist once they started understanding how data was part of the equation. And they are now hiring younger people that have the data skills. So like you
Hmm.
really don't necessarily need to have a background in kinesiology. in this next wave of sports scientists. I think someone could come in with like a really deep understanding of data science, data skills, computer science, and they could come in kind of from the side. You need to have experiences in kinesiology. So like working with athletes, you need to go intern for a sports team and then apply your data skills, and then you can take that jump as a sports scientist for pro college team. But I think like if you're young and you're trying to get into sports science, like your biggest asset is having real data skills like R, Python, any sort of coding. But also you have to be able to answer the questions that need to be asked, right? Because like
Hmm.
I'll talk to some kids that are really young sports scientists and like they know way more coding languages than I do and they can do really cool stuff, but they can't answer the question that like really needs to be answered. They're not even thinking in that way, right? So
Hmm.
you either need to have two people in that role and one that kind of has that mind and the one that can do the data, or you have to be both. So you have to develop both of those skills.
Makes sense. Like the strength coach and the data jockey kind of thing.
Yeah,
Well,
and it can it can be both, but I think but that's what I would say, you know, it's either a kinesiology track or it's a data computer science track.
okay, dang. I wouldn't have thought about the computer science track, to be honest. Um, that's pretty sweet though to know that like, you could dabble in computer science to like start off, maybe then you find yourself in sports performance and you're like, why not do both? And like you are right, I think it's the CPSS, the certified
Yep.
or the
Yeah.
CSPS. Is that
I
right?
think it's CPSS, certified professional sports scientist, something like that,
That sounds about
or
right. Yeah, who then
sports
is
science professional.
so they just talked about that up in Michigan, so it's kind of cool to hear you bring that up again. Do you think that is a necessary certification, or do you think it's too new, or do you think it's like good for them to kind of branch or develop that a little bit more?
I think you've got to have it. Someone's got to do it.
Hmm.
NSCA, you know, they're the governing body for strength and conditioning, so probably makes sense for them to jump into it first. You
Hmm.
got to have something that green lights people through, right? Because we saw the same thing in strength and conditioning where you really didn't have to have that many. You didn't have to have a certification. You really didn't have to have much of a degree to get into the field. But even now, like if you look at the NSCA's like requirements for the future of strength and conditioning, like they're way more strict than they ever have been, like here in the next like, you know, 3 to 5 years. Um, so we'll see the same thing I think with sports science. There'll be a lot stricter requirements. Probably it might take 10 years, but it'll get there eventually.
Makes sense. So with like the constant changing like sports performance world, like how do you as both like I guess I would call you a clinician because I mean you're working with data, you're working with athletes. Um, how do you guys go about like staying up to date on like the latest trends? What's the best like protocols for testing? Like how are you guys constantly changing and adapting to become like the utmost or like best in the field?
Yeah, I think like we're in a unique position where we're kind of driving a lot of the information out of Hawkin Dynamics also in our partners. So like we have a whole research team in the UK, like Dr. Jason Lake, Dr. John McMahon, Dr. Peter Mundy. I'm getting my PhD right now, so kind of part of that research team. Lauren Green, he's getting his PhD. He's our West Coast guy. So like we have sales, you know, we do some sales, but like we're like in the weeds and we're working with we don't all work directly with athletes, but like I travel a lot, test a lot of athletes. I work every single day with a customer's athletes data, like when they reach out and they want help with it. So like I make a joke sometimes, I probably looked at more force time curves than honestly anybody like in the world over the last like 3 years. Like it's a lot. So like we're practicing that, but we're not necessarily face to face with the athlete, and then we're doing a lot of research on it like behind the scenes also.
Mhm.
So it's kind of it's easy to learn because we're always around it, and like those conversations are had every single day, multiple times a day, and then it turns into an idea, and then we try to see if it has backing or not. And like I'll read research and stuff. Like our customers that send us their papers that they've wrote, like I'll read those and try to learn from them.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's not hard to learn like here at all. Like it's really like, hey, I need a break more so than it is I'm looking to learn something.
I can only imagine, man. I mean, I didn't know you were going to do your PhD. Holy smokes!
Yeah,
Like,
I'm about halfway done right now, but it's in like college basketball force plate data.
Dude, that's sick. That's so cool. I'm
Yeah.
only a little jealous right now. Only a
It
little
should
jealous.
be cool. I hope it's cool. I guess once all the publications are out and people can judge it, then we'll find out if it's cool or not.
You get that publicized, man. I'll read it. Game
It's
on.
the it's close. Like the first one will literally be out any day. So it might
Oh,
be out by the time this one is out, this
game,
podcast.
game on then, man. I'll be looking for that. Dang.
Uh,
So with all the time that you have in a day, like how much are you sleeping right now?
No, that stuff's important to me. Like
Okay, good.
with the background in deep in anatomy, biochemistry, like I understand the importance of that. Like I've worn an Oura ring every single day for like 3.5 years. Like I do like intensive blood work. Like I'm really adamant on that. I have a really good doctor that supports me on that front. Like my HRV is really high for my age, I think, and my resting heart rate's good. I sleep enough. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm not too worried about that. Like that's where I started, man. Like the place I worked at in Denver, Colorado, was called Resilience Code, and
That's
you
awesome.
guys can Google that. You can drive to Colorado, you can't find it because it's a building that doesn't have any signs. It's like the no name brand you're got your shirt on right now. But it's a really unique place. Like dude, like Peyton Manning trains there 3 days a week. Like we had some really high profile athletes and we were
Yeah.
doing, our job, and Max Schmarza was really the guy that led the performance arm of it. He's
Hmm.
now on his own, Strong by Science on Instagram. He's trying to be an NBA player now, actually. Which I people doubt him, but I don't doubt him. He everything he's told me he's gonna do, he does it. So he'll figure it out. But basically, what we were doing was there was a whole functional medicine clinic it was ran by a neurosurgeon. He was a neurosurgeon for the Olympics and the Broncos, and he had this place called Resilience Code where he was the basically the operator founder of this business. And we worked with a real lot like big names, like really big names. And we would basically, on the performance end, we would do all the exercise physiology testing, all the biomechanical testing. We had force plates, EMG, motion capture. We had metabolic carts, every single thing that money could buy that could be used for an assessment on a human, we would do. And then they did everything internally on the functional medicine side. And then we would pair those two things together, and then we would say, this is who you are from a data standpoint. So, like, that's how I learned sports science. All
Damn.
right. So like that was the application, but then Max Schmerzel on the back end was like an
Hmm.
encyclopedia of Soviet text information of like all the historical sort of science. So like when we weren't doing that testing and that evaluation process, it was, hey, read this, hey, do this, hey, try this, hey, put the BFR cuffs on, we're gonna do a Wingate test. Like what? But like you learn very quickly how the things you read about are applied with that experience. Like I wasn't there that long, but like I thought that's what sports science was after I left, and then I realized, hey, this is not what anybody is actually doing, like with any pro teams, colleges teams. So yeah, I don't know. It's cool. There's a lot of cool stuff out there.
Fast. Damn. So like if someone would want to get into sports science and they're really interested in like an internship, like how would someone go about finding that? Like, do you guys have internships? Do you know of any other types of
Yeah,
internships?
I think you gotta be proactive about things. A lot of
Mhm.
stuff. I kind of just I throw this out a lot to young kids. Like anything worth having is probably not like posted out there. Really, like any job that I've ever had and like really enjoyed, it was never like I never submitted an application for it. It
Mhm.
was always like me proactively reaching out and trying to make that thing happen that I thought was a cool opportunity. So yeah, you can apply to there's job boards like you can go on the NSCA job board, they'll have sports science postings. You can look on LinkedIn. There's like Instagram accounts that are solely dedicated to jobs, like I think like Strength Coach Network. A lot of the places where you would find a strength and conditioning job would also have a sports science job listing. But honestly, like if you're young and you're probably don't want to leave too far away from home, but like look for good opportunities within your region and proactively reach out to those people, show them you actually care. Because like if people those people are busy, right? So like you have to like do like repetitively show them, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing, and put in that effort to go and meet them, and so that they see that they give you conversation. But then you got to prove yourself at that point of meeting too.
Pretty good, man. Are there any particular colleges or programs that you would recommend for like if they wanted to get into sports science, like look at these universities and see what
Yeah.
they're doing?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Like there's some good schools, Division 1, Division 2, that would prepare you well. Um,
Hmm.
but it's also like it's really specific on what industry you want to be in. So like I think like Pitt, like University of Pittsburgh, they do a
Hmm.
really good job. They have a master's of sports science. That would be like a safer option of saying, yeah, look here. But like if you want to be basketball sports scientist, like you're probably best trying to find a really good basketball strength coach and then like trying to go and do really good work for them to help you get into basketball strength and conditioning. Then you are just going to like the best sports science master's program. Um, but like you're in the Midwest, right? Ohio. I'm from Illinois. So like Maryville University, they have a good master's program. It's run by Victor Kaiser. That's a smaller school, probably doesn't get as much publicity, but they do a really good job. Um, Penn State has one that's kind of close to you guys. So yeah, there's
But
good opportunities. There's more opportunities than we were when we were looking for those
I was gonna say,
opportunities. Yeah,
if I don't even know if this would have been a thing back like, because I'm, let's see, you're 28, I'm 32. So like, if this would have been more of like a talked about thing, or even something more like, because like you were saying before, like it was definitely if you were going to like you wanted to work with athletes, you wanted to be in the sports world, but you wanted to go beyond the strength coach. Um, Physical therapy was like for some reason the end all beat all, and I
yeah.
never really understood why. But if sports like sports science would have been more of a thing back then, not that it wasn't existing, but like more developed, I think I probably would have gone a different route. Maybe at least more so than what I thought. So, but
Yeah, I think like there's a lot more strength and conditioning coaches and opportunities now. But
Mhm.
when we were going through school, right, like strength and conditioning was more of a risky thing. There wasn't a lot of opportunities. There was probably a lot of people that did do kinesiology, wanted to be a strength coach, but never got an opportunity, and they're probably doing something entirely different right now than what we are. So I think that whole phase will happen again with sports science, where there's really not a whole lot of opportunity,
Mhm.
and there's now master's programs, things are getting accredited, there's certification, but the opportunities are still really slim. Um, it'll get better, but you really need to find an in order to get into that, not just get the degree as of the next 5 to 10 years, and then it'll get better.
In time,
Yeah, in
in
due
time.
time. So
No, so if you had to give, let's see here. If you have someone who's a developing, let's say they are a strength coach right now and they're working their way into like the sports science world, how would you go about like finding a mentor? Like let's say your school has got like a system and like you graduate, like how would you say like is there like a system like do you guys so like when you're a physical therapist, you have like the APTA, like that's the organization. Like is there
yeah,
like something like that for like the sports science world or is it just like the NSCA and that's all you got?
yeah, I mean it is the NSCA in the US, but
Hmm.
there's like probably like Australia in the UK, England, like they're probably ahead of the US in terms of sports science. So if you're trying to get like accredited and get the piece of paper and learn a little bit, I would do the NSCA stuff. But if you're
Hmm.
trying to get like a much deeper understanding of it, it's probably somewhere overseas. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to go to the best, like you're probably going to go do your master's in somewhere in the UK or you're going to do it in Australia. Now, they've just been doing it for a lot longer. They've kind of worked out the kinks. They have more specialties within those programs. And that's the same reason why like a lot of the pro teams early, they hired like a lot of Australian and English people to come over and run sports science for the teams
Hmm.
because they'd been doing it for, one of the teams in one of those countries already. So it's like, hey, you have experience, come over here and do it for us.
That's good to
Yeah, we're flowing here. We can't
hear.
stop now.
No, so when I was up at Notre Dame, I got to meet a lot of different strength coaches, but then they had, I think it was like the Australian ACU, the Australian Catholic University.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, they had like a whole bunch of different like testing protocols that they had. When you have like someone who's brand new to sports science and you have all this data, I know some people can get a little lost in the metrics and like, what would you have like advice for someone who's like brand new to this system and like, data analysis? Like, let's say they are more of like the mind of the strength coach and they have like a really good understanding of like programming. How do they go about like picking what are like, like KPIs? Like, what's like the metric I need to be looking at to make more informed decisions for my programming?
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, if we're talking about force plates, right, there's, like, a lot of
Mhm,
different applications that someone could use force plates, and there's a lot of different metrics. Like, we gave
mhm.
you 80 metrics for our CMJ. With across all of our tests, there's probably, like, 400 metrics or something like that.
Jeez.
So, there's a lot of different options, but there is a reason for that. It's because there's probably, like, 300 different types of populations of people that are using force plates, probably just within, like, athletics,
Mhm,
performance type stuff. Like, we're not just talking football, baseball, basketball, all those sports, soccer. We're talking, like, circus, ballerinas, like, karate, like, really just anybody that needs to perform at any level, and they wanna test that for, like, monitoring their performance, like profiling against the other athletes that they should be like, or that return to play setting, which probably your listeners are more familiar with, which
mhm.
is just it's either return to play or even, like, risk ideas within that. So, trying to evaluate someone's risk of, "Hey, we're not saying we're gonna predict this injury is coming, but, like, compared to someone else that is a lot like you, you're at a higher risk than they are." So that is risk ID. Um, where are we going with that? But yeah, basically selecting metrics for that. You basically want to select metrics to serve as proxies for what you care about. So
Mm,
if we are like profiling is a good way to talk about this, but you're probably in the clinical setting, you're probably not really profiling all that much. You're returning to play, you may profile them against healthy peer data to when they're fresh off an injury, and then you're going to draw that comparison. That is profiling, but it's different than true profiling. Like profiling in like a team setting is you bring everyone in day one, you do this series of tests, testing battery is what people will call it, and then you like pick the metrics you care about, you grade them all against each other, and you say, hey, this is how this one compares to this one, so on and so forth. If you had data from them last season, you would compare then to now. Here's the progress, or hey, they're worse.
mhm,
Um, so within that's like portion of profiling. You basically select metrics that are proxies to the sport or what they're asked to do routinely. So if this is military, what do they have to do a lot within their whatever they're doing for the military? Like what positions do they need to be in? When do they need to produce force at this angle, whatever. So it's like, all right, what do they do a lot of? And then we're going to try to find metrics to answer questions around that. Um, so I'm going to speak on basketball because that's what I'm heavy in basketball data right now. But for guards, right? Like change of direction is really important.
mhm,
So that doesn't mean you necessarily need to test someone running into our force plates and changing direction on them to like drive any value. You could do a counter movement jump. There's 6 phases. One of those phases is a deceleration portion where they're
mhm,
actually lowering their center of mass and then they have to stop it. If they didn't stop it, they would just keep falling through the floor. Like if you could fall through the floor and they threw themselves down, you just do that. So the braking phase, you're actually decelerating. You stop and then you change direction and you jump off the plate. So braking to propulsion. So we know that phase exists. We're going to do it in a counter movement jump, which is an extremely repeatable assessment, reliable. So we're going to do it time and time again. We're going to analyze their ability to decelerate. We know for guards in basketball, they have to do it quickly.
mhm,
So you could look at something like average breaking velocity, breaking rate of force development. But you also know if they don't have like the tissue capacity to do that, then like they could do it quickly, but they could do it quickly and they don't have the capacity. And then they wouldn't be able to stop themselves when they go to cut. That's where tissues give out, but injury happens, right?
yep,
So it's like it's not about just doing it quickly, it's about having enough of it. You can assess both those things on a force plate in a
mm,
controlled manner before you even need to get into like those sport specific tasks. Um, so the short answer, we went into the long answer, is just selecting a proxy to the movement that you or that athlete is asked to do frequently.
man, you keep impressing me right now. One of the things that I would so with my like return to sport process, and one of the things that I love to do is I have like like you already said, you already brought the word battery. So like I have an entire for like my post-op ACLs, post-op rotator cuff repairs. When I'm bringing my kids back up to speed and getting them back onto the field, before I like clear them and before they have like the physician or surgeon clearance as well. One of the things that I've been dying and trying to get everyone on board with is to basically get force plates into the clinic setting so that I can begin being one of, I'd say probably one of the only ones within my area to have that available and at my disposal, but then also having that to discuss that. How much do you think the force plate input or like the data from the force plates could be implemented into the rehab setting? And do you think it's an effective, I don't want to call it like a medallion, it's not a medallion. And like, would you say it's like an effective way to like showcase that data and like what like, your like rehab programs are as effective as anyone else in the system?
Yeah, so at its most basic level, uh, force plates are just giving you objective information back. So think of it as like I use this analogy like a heart rate monitor. It's just giving you that insight back of like, hey, this is what your heartbeat looks like. This is what the metric, like the metric that we see is not the direct feedback. The feedback is a signal that it's giving you of your heartbeat, and then the algorithm is giving you that metric of, hey, here's your beats per minute. This is your value. So same thing with the force plate is just giving you feedback on how that person is moving the day. Like they're going to move differently almost every single day, but it's a snapshot in time. Hey, this is how they're moving, and then that metric will. It's just like your heart rate. Let's use jump height. Like that's the heart rate metric
Mhm.
of the force plate, right? So it's just really simple feedback. Like when I bought these first as a customer, or Adam Fletcher did it on a basketball. I joined him a month later, so we were customers first, really early. Um, and basically, the reason why he wanted it is just like to get feedback because of the basketball schedule, and especially in college basketball, it's way worse now. But you could play in like three different time zones twice a week, every single week, and like things changed a lot. So you just want a signal of how that person, how they are feeling, how they're moving differently, because especially like for elite athletes, like they're really good at just they're good at operating at a level of stress, inflammation, feeling sore. And so they've done this for 18, 20, 25, 30 years if you're with, pro athletes,
True.
and they're used to that feeling. So they're not necessarily going to tell you that. So you use different metrics like a force plate, heart rate, internal measures, HRV, and that stuff to give you a glimpse of, hey, maybe they've been feeling down for a few days in a row now, and we're just going to try to make an adjustment off what we see. So the same thing is in that return to play environment. Like we know they're not healthy. We know something happened. They were cut on this limb. We know it's probably not the way the other healthy limb looks like.
Hmm.
So let's assess it, see what it looks like. Let's first look at, and I urge a lot of people to do this, look at the shape before you even think about the metrics, right? Like look at the shapes first and then try to pair that with the metric. Because
Hmm.
honestly, for someone that's really well trained in force plate, they could almost just use the shape alone to like derive all of their insight. Like they almost may like for certain situations, I really don't even need to look at the metrics to be able to answer how that athlete's moving. I could almost answer like how tall they are. Hey, this person has a tall torso. They probably have this injury history based on this force time profile I see. So
Dang.
shape first, try to get really good at understanding what that thing's telling you. Um, and we can talk about that if you want, but start there and then use the metrics to kind of, batch that together. And like the normative data, that's great. Everybody wants that. But like one, where does it coming from? Do you really know the source? Do you know how it was collected? But also like the best normative data is that specific type of person in that specific type of region. So like I really urge clinicians to like go out and get healthy populations in your area. But also it's just normative data. It's just going to give you insight. Like use the shape first, look at the metrics second, and then use what people are telling you this person should be like third.
There's some good data to be had and to maybe, emphasize or set us apart in terms of data analysis, more insights, and then also just, I think finalizing a very nice testing battery. Um,
Yeah. I think like if anyone's made it this far, right? Like we'll give them some some tidbits of like what matters for return to play setting.
mhm,
And this is kind of like not unique to any certain type of injury. It's kind of universal for each. It's like are they symmetrical? Are they decelerating through that limb? Do they land in a stiff or a locked position?
mhm,
Like those are three things that one can tell you if someone's at risk of injury, or two, if they're like almost like guarding that limb that they just got cut on or had an injury on.
yeah,
Not even talking about metrics at all. Just like those are three principles that are pretty much true for any type of injury, lower or upper body.
mhm,
Now, then it's like your job to like figure out what metrics fit within those categories matter for that sport, that age, that position, that type of person. I would riddle those off right now. I'm not going to, but like that's the challenge and that's what makes someone good
Mhm.
at being able to apply force plate data is think critically through who they're working with. Like that is the art of the science, right? Just like training, just like being a physical therapist, there's two sides of it, and it's the same thing with this force plate data.
That's good to know. So like when you start seeing like clinicians who are maybe mismanaging data or like aren't getting the right, I guess, conclusions from the data, how do you guys go about like educating like clinicians like myself or strength coaches? Like, how do you guys make like what's, I mean, obviously you guys have like this intense understanding of like the metrics and the data, and like you guys have been around this, like you guys have been immersed in it. So like this is like breathing air for you at this point. So like how do you get someone up to speed quickly when like you want, they basically want to implement it like yesterday? Like, how do you
Yeah.
guys, what's the crash course like?
Yeah, it takes time to get good at anything, right? Like,
Mm,
but I think it is harder to work with clinicians that are like it's easy for us to work together because like you're curious, you kind of have a strength and conditioning background, you're trying to find better ways. So like we can have that open conversation and you can show me a forced time curve and I can be like, hey, this is what I think, what do you think? We can have that dialect where
mm,
there's a whole pocket of therapists and clinicians that are like very closed-minded because they were trained this way. This was the schooling that I had. And
mhm,
we didn't learn force plates there. Well, yeah, your school is probably like 5 to 10 years behind where, the actual industry is. But
mm,
this is also like a brand new industry to anybody, not just therapists or clinicians. So you have to have an open mind first before we can really have a conversation. We'll still try to like do a really good job of teaching those people, but it
mhm,
is harder because you're trying to teach someone that doesn't really want to be taught. They just want the answer. They just want to know what the answer is. And hey, I don't have time because my hospital setting me up to see these many people per day, and I have to get 10 through, and I'm tired by the time I leave. I have kids, and I have no time to learn. That's great. I understand that situation exists times 1,000. We will still try to teach that person, right? Like we're not just going to give you the answer because you're just going to keep coming back for the answer and then no one's ever really going to learn. Like you're not going to get any better. We're just going to be doing a portion of your job for you every time you come to us and ask. We'd rather like get you up to speed, kind of be with you on that journey. um, and that's how we do our trainings here in our sports science and everything. Those people exist in every industry, but um, yeah, we try to. I just keep saying like, we grab your hand and we'll work with you through those situations until you're proficient at it.
nice, man. It's glad. I'm glad to know it's not just like here's the device, have fun, do what you need to do. That's kind
No,
of good now.
yeah, we want people to use our system. If you're not using the system, that's not a success for us at all.
What's your guys' type of setup? Like when you guys have like let's say strength conditioning coach setup, like how do you guys like, is it like the force plates get the data and then it sends it to like a computer, or is it like you have to have the computer connected to the force plates? Like how, what's
Yeah.
your guys' setup like?
So force, it's kind of a three-part system. Two of the parts, the end user doesn't really know they're two. But you have the force plates. We brought the wireless force plate to market in 2017, so we were the first ones to ever do that. And then we were the first ones to ever do this portable mobile app that you can run the force plates on a tablet. We got fireworks and stuff
I
behind me.
don't
I'm
know how you
on
just
there
did
doing
that.
cool.
Shoot.
But I think it's like that. But yeah, basically, so retrack. We brought the wireless plates to market, brought the mobile app to market. So that's two parts. The tablet will talk to the force plates directly and say, hey, we're hitting play, we're starting this test.
Hmm.
Once that is saved and
Hmm.
you're on a connection, it'll go to our cloud, which is just a central location where all the data is stored. There's kind of like two parts to it. In the cloud, you can just view the test that came through, or we have this whole other part of it that's like an analyze section, and there's a bunch of different reports. All the data flows in automatically. So you will essentially, if you bought our, had our plates tomorrow, they arrived, you'd set a template within a report. You say, hey, I want this data to flow into it. You would never have to touch that report or template again. The data will flow into it every single day. You could
Hmm.
just log in, look at it, PDF, print, add your chart notes, put in your file. So once it's set, there's very little work. Um, It's just, getting that's why we train people really well. It's like, hey, this is what we think
Mhm.
matters for what you're trying to accomplish. Let's build it and then get your hands dirty, like start testing, It's not gonna do any good if it's just sitting there in the corner.
True. Collecting dust,
Yeah.
which that would drive me nuts. But no, I think that'd be a lot of fun. I guess my hopes and aspirations would be to one day eventually have like, high school team testing where like they come in, you get a baseline preseason, and then that way if there's something that happens, at least you have that like data to like run off of so that when you go through and you're trying to get them back to sport, you have baseline metrics to kind of get them back to. And then you have the rehab program for them to kind of basically continue to go through and work through. And then when we get to that return to sport aspect, maybe we can see maybe where there's still gaps in like the return. And I think, not that I think it's a bad thing. I think having more data is usually good, but I definitely think like teasing out what's the important data to have for each person, I think is, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not. I'd be more than happy to hear your side of this. I think teasing this out based on like the individual as well as the sport is going to be really important. I think sometimes that gets lost with certain clinicians, especially when they get like new exposure to this type of technology and they're just kind of looking at everything and thinking, what the heck am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
I would like to see that streamlined in some way, but I definitely feel like if we're going to do this, like obviously there's like an individual, I mean, strength conditioning 101, right? The individual. So like we
Yeah,
want important metrics, but like how do we go about like selecting what's the important metric for that individual? You know what I mean?
it could be streamlined and we could just make, hey, this is what you will use for this type of injury. But like, is that the truth 100%?
Hmm.
Probably not. So like there's other ways to look at it. So we more so just we want to give you that autonomy to select that way. But there are like a really good example of this is like reactive strength index, RSI, modified RSI. Like it's been around for a very, very long time. But if
Hmm.
you look at like social media, physical therapy, athletic training, social media, it's like new. It's like the holy grail. It's a new thing, right? And it's like, yeah, 100 years ago it was new. But it's kind of getting into that, and it's like, oh, this is the metric we really need to care about. Not necessarily. Like, I mean, one, it's a calculation of two metrics, so you're still kind of have to answer the question of what it is. Um, that so RSI stands for Reactive Strength Index.
Hmm.
Been around for a very long time, as we just talked about. Hopefully, you cut out our blurb. But
I will
there's
cut that
also
out.
there's also modified RSI, which it's a slight change in that calculation. Still trying to accomplish the same thing.
Hmm.
But people will like look at that and be like, all right, this is the metric for readiness. This will tell us exactly if they're ready to train or not, and we'll change our program, we'll change our rehab based on this metric.
Hmm.
Like that's a massive assumption, especially for like a medical issue that someone's
Hmm.
going through. But also I've seen this work. It's not really published all that well. Like a good friend of mine he's a football sports scientist. With his team, he literally had a different subset of metrics for readiness for every single individual on that football team. So what, there's 100 guys on the team, and he basically used like really big data, skills that I don't have, that a lot of people don't have, to basically say, for this guy, these are the three things that will change if they're low in readiness. For this guy, these are the four things that will change. For this guy, these are the two things that will change. And he basically ran an internal study to be able to figure that out. But that is like a very detailed, that's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have those skills, but
Let alone the
you
time.
just, yeah, you just need to know that. You need to know that first so that you're not
Hmm.
that person on social media saying RSI is the Bible. This is exactly what we're going to follow. You know,
Hmm.
like people don't realize how there is a lot of depth behind that,
Hmm.
behind these different metrics. And RSI is merit. It's a good starting place, but don't hang your hat on it as the answer.
Good. That's kind of like what I like to hear because I feel like whenever we have like, that athlete or that patient that comes in, it might have a knee diagnosis, but we're not going to treat them all the same. There's no cookie cutter. So that's why I was just kind of curious to see if there's like ways that you guys go about like, yes, we have those KPIs, we have those metrics that we want to look at, but like is there like is it good to get away from the cookie cutter every once in a while and like look at specific measures for individuals? And that's good to hear. I love to hear
Yeah. I
that.
think like, I mean, honestly, I've worked with a lot of different physical therapists, the private practices, the large hospitals, and the ones that I think are doing it best, like from a large hospital standpoint, is
Hmm.
there's usually like a dedicated person within that department that is like the force play person, and then that we work with that force play person that gets transmitted to the rest of the group. Maybe that person doesn't have as high of like a workload of seeing 10 patients a day. Maybe you cut that in half, and their job is outreach, educating the staff on this technology because we know it has a lot of value.
Mhm.
Um, so we work really closely with that person, get them up to speed. They will build out like, hey, we have 10 types of injuries that we see most of this clinic. For each one of these 10 types of injuries, here are the metrics that we're going to look at. Those are the standards. We're going to filter down our system. We're only going to show those metrics. We're going to share them with each clinician.
Mhm.
And then, there's some wiggle room. So, like, hey, if this is a female soccer 12-year-old athlete, then maybe these things might matter too. There's like two or three things probably for each different population that can be added into that standard for each type of injury. That's how I would set it up if I were in that position.
No, I would actually like that kind of a setup. I definitely think there needs to be, at least in my 1,000-foot view from where I'm at within my company. I definitely think there needs to be more education on the use of force plates, let alone, especially the fact that we're always trying to push for the most advanced ways for like helping our kids get back to sport or our patients get back to their daily life. And I think the more in-depth analysis you can get, let alone have that expert in the clinic or in the region, maybe even in like East Coast to West Coast, have that person that you can kind of rely on. I think that is a definite need. Um, Granted, I mean, I know we have like our sports center of excellence and we have a lot of different
Hmm.
people that we can reach out to, but I think, off the top of my head, I couldn't even tell you who that is for my market right now. So, I mean, something to look into, it's always fun. It's always evolving. It just makes it, we're just going into work every day a little bit more interesting, you know?
Yeah, and I think like there are some clinics now that have, biomechanists on staff and they're trying to drive like these initiatives, clinical outcomes, pushing out some research through that hospital.
Hmm.
But even like there's a big difference between someone that can kind like a biomechanist mind that can roll that out for clinicians at a mass scale
Hmm.
versus a biomechanist that can just, we're going to sign this person up 2 months from now. They're going to do this deep biomechanical assessment in our lab. We're going to do mocap. It's going to be perfect and all this stuff. That's a much different type of biomechanist in person,
Hmm.
where sometimes they will throw that type of biomechanist on this project, and it doesn't really nothing really transpires because that person doesn't really have that skill set.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I got a I got a lot of thoughts on that
Yeah,
that
man.
that
No.
side of the industry.
So we could have, man, we got like in the perfect world, I feel like physical therapy is is a wonderful, wonderful field, and I absolutely love my profession, especially all that it's given to me over the last few years. I definitely think that in terms of the sports medicine model and what we've all done, um, no one's ever really brought in like the sports science aspect of things. I mean, we always talk about being up to date on like our evidence-based practice. And I think that with the way that technology is evolving, I mean, heck, look at AI now. One of the things that I feel like we failed to implement so far has been force plates, at least consistently throughout markets and things of that nature. And that's why I think like in a perfect setting, and I mean the perfect setting, you could have the physical therapist, strength conditioning coach, sports scientist, and maybe even athletic trainer that would like go out to these games for these kids. I mean, heck, tomorrow I'm gonna try to go to a baseball game, uh,
Nice.
watch one of my kids go play, high school, just local high school game. It's
Hmm.
gonna be fun. But like if I could have that type of a setup in a clinic, like right now I've got two PTs and I got a PTA, and like in a perfect world, I would love to add on like maybe like a strength coach or two, and then have someone who could potentially do like the force plate analysis and like the baseline testing. So like if the kids do get hurt, guess what? They're coming right in. They're starting rehab. We're getting plan all ready to go. Everyone's in on the same team huddle, whatever you need to call it, and we got
Yeah.
things moving in the right direction. Like that would be, oh man, in perfect world though.
Yeah, it's tougher for a small business. Like I didn't say this earlier, but I owned a gym for 3 years also, like a small training facility in Illinois. And
Add
I
more to your
understand
list.
I
Nice.
understand like how it's hard to commit money towards things that aren't really materialized immediately.
Hmm.
Um, so it's easier for like a larger hospital network that has a bunch of clinics to say, hey, we're taking this money off the table. This person is now outreach. Their outreach, building our force plate system. They could have biomechanist skills to actually do the research too.
Hmm.
For a smaller facility, and maybe it is a strength coach that you kind of designate a few of some of their time doing that outreach. But
Yeah.
it's a marketing expense too. Like there is a the force plates are science, and there's a lot of science behind what we do. But
Hmm.
like in the short term, how you see the money back on it quickest is, hey, you're trying to get patients, telling them we have this tool.
Mhm.
It's going to give us a lot of great information about your injury. That's why you should come see us instead of these other clinics in the area. So that's how you try to, justify the return on the investment because it is an investment. It's not cheap. You can't go to Walmart and
Sure.
buy a force plate.
Hmm. Question, just off the top of my head. So like one of the things that the University of Dayton does in their doctor of physical therapy program is they have what's called an independent study.
hmm
Would you ever take on a UD student if they wanted to come up and check out and see like what is a sports like what's a day in the sports scientist like?
Like here at Hawkin.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have people stop by all the time, to be honest with you. Yeah,
Every
like I've had some interns every summer. We'll have another one here this year. Um, but yeah, like honestly, if people are listening and you're like in Portland, Maine, which is where Hawkin Dynamics is at,
Mhm.
like it's not our doors are locked. It's not an open door policy. But like if you hit us up and let us know you're coming, yeah, we'll show you around. Like we'll show you that we manufacture everything here in the US and like literally
Mhm.
across the hallway behind me. Um, our developer's still in office right now, Cody, and I hear him on his computer. We
Jesus.
have this is our headquarters, right? So we got like a bunch of
Yeah.
people here, and we build everything too. So it's cool to see. Uh, Portland, Maine's a sick area in the summer, so I'm sure some people listening are already have a trip planned out here, so you can stop by and we'll buy you a coffee.
Oh, I know. You guys are on my bucket list. I want to come up there sometime. I think that'd be so much fun.
Come in the summer or the fall. Don't come in the winter or the spring. I mean, like now is pushing it. You may now would be almost a good time to come.
Almost a good time.
Yeah,
I mean, I just got into skiing this past winter, so I mean, if you guys got good skiing, game on.
that's pretty solid. I skied a few times this year. I skied in Colorado too this season, and the skiing experience in Maine was actually better than the day that I was in Colorado.
Where'd you go in Colorado?
Yeah. I mean, I went to Winter Park, very legit, right? But it was
Yeah.
just it wasn't the right environment. It'd been a warmer winter out there in Colorado, so the snow was way better in Maine. Like it was way better than Colorado. So I was like, I could have just stayed there,
Dang.
drove an hour north.
Okay. I'll have to remember that. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah,
Dang.
Sunday River. That's a good mountain, pretty
Sunday
close to
River.
here. Yep,
Okay. I'll have to run that by my wife. I'm sure she'd be interested. She's actually the one that got me into skiing, her and her family. So
nice.
imagine this. My wife can hardly walk through the kitchen without tripping on her own feet, but she can go down a mountain backwards.
You can ski
All right.
well.
I'm
That's
like, okay,
nice.
this
She
is
started
terrifying.
on skis, walking second.
I know. I was like, okay, this is terrifying. And then she taught me how to ski, and I was like, all right, I'm not gonna die now. It'll be fun.
Yeah, skiing like skiers are really strong. Like especially like I was at Colby College for a little bit,
Hmm.
Division III school here. They have alpine and Nordic skiing. Those are were the we had 32 sports there. Those were the strongest athletes out of all the 32 teams.
Holy crap, that's actually
Yeah,
pretty sick.
very strong. Like really high isometric, like max effort isometric numbers, like the highest out of any sport, higher than football, higher than baseball. Like it's pretty legit. They build up a lot of strength.
Dang, would never have guessed that out of skiers.
Yeah, and then like cross country skiing, you can do that out here too if
Hmm.
you're into that.
So like, I'd be really curious to get her up there and just kind of see like what the heck it's like up there. I've never been up north into Maine or anything like that, so could be a fun
Yeah,
time.
yeah, you could drive probably because I drove through Ohio when I moved out here from Illinois.
You didn't miss much.
It's about halfway. I think it was dark the entire time I was in Ohio.
Uh, so last question for you, big guy. If you had any, I guess you could say clinical pearls or wise words of advice for, the listeners right now, what would you say in regards to sports science? Got this part. So if you have someone who's going into the sports science field and they are brand new to this, what would be like the number one thing that they should look out for? Or like what's like the best thing for someone who's developing
Look out or read
both?
both. Um, there's never an answer. When you find the answer, it's still not the right answer. Like always keep exploring for alternatives because
Hmm.
what science is, right, at its basic form is like, hey, I have this idea. I'm going to try to control this idea. And then I'm going to test this idea. And then I'm going to show it to my friends. And they're going to say, yes, this idea is real, or yes, this idea is not real, peer reviewed. And then it gets published. So, like a sports scientist is doing that a bunch, usually with themselves or with their peers. It's not getting published. you're not getting these final checks that green light it. So like you may have something you feel really confident, right? But like always challenge that idea. Like I've been in a bubble of force plates for 6 years. I know a lot about force plates, but I still learn something new every single day, and I still think differently about something that I thought I knew. So it's like always challenging your opinion. If you keep doing that, you'll eventually land much closer to the truth. Um, so that is the wisdom. Don't get stuck in that in your way. I think that also expands to therapists that are older that have a
Mhm.
way. Their way probably works. It's probably a really great way, but like you can still keep getting better on top of your really great way. You know, like does LeBron stop training because he's already the best in the world? No,
Yeah.
he's trying to get a little bit better every single day. Um, so that's that. And then what I would read, um, like there's some great books. I got them up here on my bookshelf, but like the stuff by Komi, Komi. He's a Soviet researcher. He's wrote, well, I think he's either Soviet or Russian, but a little bit older. He has really good principles of sports science. Did a lot of really good work. He didn't have the technology. I think if he had all the technology that existed today, like
Mhm.
he would be way better than anybody. Like the his, it wouldn't even be close. But he has really good like thought processes and ideas.
Mhm.
Um, like Super Training is a sports science Bible. It's pretty basic. Like everybody would say that if you ask them what to read for sports science. Um, there's a good book by Michael McWin. It's more so I probably butchered his name, so I apologize for that. But it's basically like these are the different assessments you can do within the realm of sports science. It's kind
Mhm.
of older, so there's probably some new ones. Like it was before our company even existed.
Oh, wow.
So, but it's a good framework for just understanding what kind of testing can exist within sports science. Um, I think I'll leave it with this: is that sports science is not really testing like it's not really testing our data. Like it is we use those things to help us answer questions about like it's more of like it's a thought process of trying to answer a question about a sport, an individual, person, rehab, whatever, and then we're using tools of data testing to help answer that question. So you just kind of have to be, a little bit analytical minded um, to help answer those ideas or questions you're seeking.
Pretty good way to, finalize the episode, man. Not bad. I know I gave you a loaded gun there, didn't
It was good. Hopefully that was fun challenge to work through. Thank you, Lewis.
I? Anytime, man. No, I hope you guys enjoyed the interview here today with Drake Berberet with Hawkin Dynamics. If you guys ever have any questions or concerns, reach out. Um, Maybe you'll have a UD student here up there in the upcoming year. You never know.
Yeah, we'll talk offline about that for sure.
Sounds like a plan, man. No, but we hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having me.